Okay, let's assume you're a project manager and you're not a director, you're just a project manager, and you wish to integrate, right? Okay, so you have a remarkable opportunity other people don't have. You have something called a project. Now, you have the ability to do some experiments there. If you remember Deming, W.E. Deming, right? Deming-Short model. First you plan, you determine the action, then you do, you apply the action and capture the data, then you check, you confirm the action is applied, and you capture data for analysis, you confirm, that it was applied and it's behaving as normal, and then you act, right? PDCA. Okay, you can do that. And that's great. Now, can you do that on your own? Sure, but it's not going to be as valuable as if you share it. And this is the key. This is what I learned when I became a trainer. If you're able to describe what you're doing exactly in the way that it's done, and people understand what you're saying, then you can actually ensure that people understand you. It's the Feynman technique, right? Make sure that what you're saying is at the level that people are ready to receive. So you're talking to the team in the context of the team doing their work. So you're setting an environment, right? Second of all, you're leading instead of dragging people through the project. You don't want to pull people through things. We talk about being a servant leader when we discuss leadership topics. This means that people follow you, right? You lead, they follow. Well, sort of. What it means is that you're actually creating environments such that the best work is done, like a farmer. Farmer clears out the rocks and weeds, gets rid of them so that all that the plants have to do is grow naturally and healthy. That's what you do with your team. You make sure that nothing gets in their way. You make sure the work they do, they have the knowledge, they enjoy it, and they're moving forward. You make sure that they trust each other and participating, right? There you go. You're also motivating, giving them a good reason to do work well, and you're also ensuring that they can contribute and their voices are heard, and they're confident and all those things. This is the key. You engage through trust. You get them interested, you get them participating, they're committed, and therefore they take on ownership. This is the point where you can actually motivate even further. And this is where you can introduce components, right? You don't know which component you want to introduce? How about listening to your stakeholders? What do your stakeholders need? Communication. Okay, you invite your team to problem solve. What's the communication issue? What have we heard? Bringing them into the problem solving and having them engage. Is quality a high requirement? Let's talk about that. If risk is, let's talk about that. And take a single concept, apply it through the Plan, Do, Check Act. Capture your data, demonstrate your team how valuable it is. Number one, your team's learning and growing. Number two, you are learning and growing. Works magically. You don't have to move mountains. All you have to do is small, measurable steps that you can go back at the end of the project and say, here's what we did. And I'm really proud of us. It's a great job, guys. Now, the beautiful thing is we already have a framework that says, let's capture lessons learned, right? It's already there. So we can actually capture these as OPAs and send them back to the project management office or contribute to organizational learning. We can also capture them as lessons learned and put them in our own files for this project and future project. Don't have a PMO? Create one. You don't have to ask for permission. Maybe your PMO will just be 2 or 3 people sitting down at a table over lunch. What's a PMO? It's 2 things. It's standardization of project management, good practice, right? It's repeatable and it's scalable. And it's also knowledge sharing. If you look at the definition of a project management office, that's what the PMBOK says. Nothing says that it has to be ordained by executives. Nothing says that it has to be anything. You're creating something that you see of value. And if it makes your work better, if it makes your job better, you're going to be happier and you're going to be more fulfilled and you're going to be more excited. And guess what's going to happen? That's going to contribute to the satisfaction and fulfillment of your stakeholders and your project team. Very simple, right? So what have we done? We've used the skills that we've learned in project management to, number one, make things a little better, focus and prioritize on the requirements of individual projects, treat our individual projects as scientific experiments, not people, but the projects, and Petri dishes, right? You have an organization in isolation called a project, and you get to have fun. Now, if your project is going to last between 7 and 2 years, you have an opportunity to start looking at more rich things and more mature things. This is where you get into culture. When you have a 2 to 6 week project, you usually don't have a culture. But when it gets a little longer than 7 months, all of a sudden, you're going to notice all these unwritten rules and laws, and this is where it gets really exciting, okay? Okay, so we have you as a project manager, and we have an opportunity for you to grow your environment. And it can be anything. Communication management, right? My project manager mentor back in 2001 actually brought us into experiments. Our project was a conference, right? We were going there and presenting some technology. And we had to prepare the technology, prepare the materials and the research, prepare the meetings, get ready for decision making and all that. Good marketing project, right? And so he gave us a little communication exercise. And he sent us all out. And he said, guys, whoever collects the most business cards wins. And again, you cannot collect a business card unless you have engaged them both in why they're there and the product they're promoting, and why you're there and the product you're promoting. Get those 2 things named, bring them back, and that business card counts as a point. It doesn't have to be project related. It can be about the knowledge area. It can be about the process group. So we have a lot of opportunity here, right? Again, it's your creativity and the team's innovation that makes this exciting and engaging. Let's step it up a little bit. Let's assume we're the director of an organization. It doesn't have to be a director of project management office or a director of a project management team or program management or any of that, just a director, okay? And you want to actually take advantage of projects and take advantage of projects better. So how are you going to do it? You have a problem, right? What's the issue with organizations? Usually they have to split their time. Some of the time they're going to be working on operations, and some of the time they're going to work on projects. So it's a real world experience. Well, there's a handy little book called, it's a standard published by Project Management Institute called the Organizational Project Management Maturity Model, or OPM3. We can look at that if you're curious. It actually describes organizations how they function in relationship to projects, programs, and portfolios. And it talks about how you integrate good practice in these areas in order to ensure business value. And that's the key. Maturity is not necessarily how old the organization is, right? It's not an old organization, but it's a smart one. Gartner in 1995 put together a maturity model. It was for information technology, the IT infrastructure maturity model, right? And they actually showed how an organization embracing technology can go through levels of maturity. First, it's like you're ad hoc. You're just doing things left and right. Second, you standardize. Third, you centralize. You bring the different functions together in one group. Centralization and standardization are hallmarks for a reasonably mature organization. Now, what you can do is scale. That's exactly right. This is why most organizations do this type of maturing, and why process and procedure is so important, is repeatability gets very valuable when you repeat success. And when you remove defects, you're repeating, things without defects too. This is what we want to do. So what do you do here? You want to actually look for opportunities to centralize and standardize. And then beyond that, you can actually go further and further into maturity. Now, that was information technology, right? We talked about that. We are interested in project management and organizations, and how organizations can take advantage of project management. First of all, why does an organization like projects and project management? What's the value? Okay, we talk about that in class. We say, well, it's change. It's not just change, it's controlled change, right? So organizations primarily adopt projects for controlled change. So if you have an organization that has stable, repeatable, successful operations, then it can take a component of its organization and apply reasonable, measured change. That's why we have a director who might want to understand how to integrate good practice project management. So first thing you're going to want to do is ask yourself, where are we today? And that's the third bullet here that we're talking about. Determining maturity. Okay, that's fine. Now, we have a choice. Once we know how mature we are, we can look at what we want to integrate. Maybe our stakeholders are saying, you know what? I'm really interested in quality this next year. Can you grow your quality capabilities? Or you have stakeholders who are complaining about communication being inefficient and not being regular, right? What you can do then is determine the target to be integrated, or you can go back and prioritize yourself. What do you see is necessary from your metrics, right? As directors, we all have our key performance indicators. We have our management by objective, right? And we can actually point our targets at growing those capabilities. Again, it's looking at the current state, what are the gaps? Future state, where do we want to be? Finding a variance and closing that variance. And how do we close that variance? Well, I would promote, again, the Deming short cycle, plan, do, check, act, right? First you plan, you determine the action to be applied, the project, that we're going to do. Then you apply that action, and then you measure the results of that action and confirm it's behaving as you predicted. And then you can actually gather success, right? And you bring it in with components. Now, this is the beautiful thing. Organizational project management sits between business value and project program portfolio management. This is the secret. You have to look for it a little bit. So you have on one side your project management as a director. You have on the other side, you have your operations. And in the middle, you have your business value. Your operations continuing in operation bring value, and projects just increase it. How do project management offices fit in this model? Well, once again, it's pretty easy, right? If you think about it, what is a project management office? Well, back on the previous slide, when I was a project manager, a PMO centralizes and standardizes project management. Why? Because you want to grow the value. And it also is a repository for lessons learned. It's a focus area where project managers and project-related activities and their owners can go to have help. That's a really nice model. Now, the Organizational Project Management Maturity Model, OPM3, gives you the model. Let me show you something. I'm going to step out here. Now let's close this out. And let's go over to PMI, Project Management Institute, and look at the standards. If you go to the foundational standards, you'll find the 3rd edition of OPM3, right? This is how you can do it, where you connect projects to business value. But that's not the only one you can look at. Over here on practice guides, it has an implementation guide. Implementing organizational project management. How do I do it? So you even have a guide to tell you how to do it along the way. You can use a general consulting model, as I was talking about, or you can actually do it with a comprehensive formal approach. And that's what this guide is all about. You know, again, this is where you're doing it as a complete organization. Now, this leads us to a topic we're going to talk about in a moment. Number 1, do I want to do a piece project management? Number 2, do I want to do what's called a forklift, the whole thing? As a project manager, I would recommend piecemeal, piece by piece by piece, unless you have a major project that needs the whole spectrum, right? As a director, you have a choice, and you have the ability to influence a full comprehensive framework. And that's where I would start looking at these. It's valuable, even if you're thinking of just bringing formal quality management or formal risk management or formal configuration management or formal change management. That's great. But again, if you want to do the whole project management framework and bring it in comprehensively, this is a great place to start. So we talked about me as a project manager. And so we talked about also me as a director and how am I to do this? Third, there's some things to consider. Number 1, do you need early wins? Do you have a full trusting team as a project manager? Do you have a full trusting organization? You can probably do a forklift or a comprehensive implementation, but if you need early wins, especially if you're a project manager, integrate components you know well, you're strong in, and you can describe them very accurately, and you're very comfortable demonstrating them, right? And again, the confidence you provide will only be repaid in more trust that's given to you. What if you're going into areas where you're not so strong? Like me, I know risk, right? I took it in undergraduate school. I took it in graduate school. I passed my PMP, so I know risk management. I am in no way an expert. I formally managed risk for at least 10 years of my projects, but still, I wouldn't call myself an expert. I have met experts, and these guys are wizards. So what I'm going to have to do is do a more scaled approach, right? I'm going to have to make sure that I have things that will work 98% of the time, right? Somewhere between 2 and 3 standard deviations. And I'm going to have to talk about unknowns, and I'm going to have to talk about probabilities and impact. Now, that tends to be a little scary for the people we're leading, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for you to engage them in what happens when mistakes are made. I'm not talking about, bad mistakes. I'm talking about, what if we went down the wrong path? How do we course correct? How do we move from here back to where we should be? And it gives you an opportunity to actually work through these scenarios that, as a director, are just part of the daily job. Yeah, sure, we should have made a decision back there, but we're here today and now we're moving. Again, it demonstrates and shows the team that confidence and trust and a well-working team are better than any mistake that anybody could contribute. As long as you measure, right? As long as you communicate and you share the load. Now, risk is not necessarily bad, right? We talk about people who pursue risk, not just people who want to eliminate risk, but people who out and out pursue them. In our culture, what do we call them? We call them entrepreneurs, right? Because oftentimes with great risk comes great reward. Now, it has to be measured, and we have to understand at least an estimation of the probability of the opportunity, along with an estimation of the probability of the threat. And with those analyses and those decisions, we can go in and get the opportunities. And we can be selective where we focus and where we want to gain and where we really shouldn't. And that's what you should be teaching your team and your peers anyway, right? Okay, so here we are. We have an integration model. We have a current state, a future state, a variance, and a plan of action. We have a way as project managers to bring what we know is good practice into our environment from a project level. And we also have a way to bring it in from an organizational level too, right? And it's all mapped out for us and documented and all that. And we have some other considerations that we can do too. There's a lot of bumps along the way. And this is where the understanding of management and leadership comes in, and the understanding of, once again, mistakes are to be corrected from and moved forward from so that we can gain knowledge and innovation. And accepting risk is something that we measure, especially when there's associated opportunity. Okay, that is what I wanted to talk about today. Do you have any questions real quickly? In our previous webinar, we had a lot of questions. By the way, I didn't tell you my background. This is who I am. If you haven't attended one of my classes, project management has been all of my professional life. I've done projects since 1992. Got my PMP in 2003. I started teaching project management and PMP prep in 2004. Between 2000 and 2007, I was a consulting project manager. And a lot of the time going into an organization was just what we talk about. You know, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Where do you feel pain? How can we do what you're doing? How can we help you remove that pain? Now, the biggest thing that I can actually, the biggest advice I can give you and anybody, this has to be authentic. You have to practice it, and I would recommend practicing it inside the projects first. It has to come with a certain level of integrity and authenticity from you, and you have to remain objective. They are going to be the decision makers, just like you make sure in a project. But your voice of reason and your facilitation is what makes this exciting. That's what it's about. And all of a sudden, you're no longer a project manager, you're a consultant and advisor, and you're changing the direction of business. And that's what I did between 2002 and 2008. And then for the last 8 or 9 years, this is my job. I'll pause right now to wait for any questions. And by the way, if you're interested in this material, it has some documentation in the back. It just references to the material where I pulled this from. You could actually gather what I've been talking about if you buy a Peter Drucker library. W.E. Deming talked about this, right? Plan, Do, Check, Act Deming, and he has some marvelous books in this area. If you go into Greek history and philosophers, they talk about the heuristic, and it does the same thing. And then there's a mathematician out in Berkeley, if you're curious, who actually used this to great success in his math classes and teaching freshmen and sophomore math majors in how to solve problems as well. But yeah, this isn't difficult to understand, but doing it the first few times, if you're not comfortable with it, can be a little disconcerting. Okay, do you have any questions?
Right. So much, Tim, for that. We will be opening the lines for the questions. I can go ahead and unmute you. You can straight away ask Tim about any question you have, and we can carry on the discussion from there. Please raise your hand and I will unmute you. Thank you, everyone.
And for its worth, any project management topic we can discuss. And also, preparing for the PMP exam, we can talk about that. We can talk about the exam itself. We can talk about the application. I'm here for you.
Hi, Tim.
Good day.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
All right. My question is, I am new to PMP as in the framework, but I do have like understanding of why it's there, and I want to appear for the examination to be a certified professional in this field. So, what are the advice you would provide to a person like me, and how would you want a person like me who has some background but not structured knowledge about the PMP examination or project management to approach PMP exam? I hope I was clear in my question.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have an introduction, but not a great knowledge in project management. How do I progress? Okay, so there's basically 3 ways we learn. You can read, and it gives you certain knowledge. You can do, which is much better, right? Applying the action teaches you much more than just reading. It really does. And I would recommend that you do this. And I'll get into more detail in a minute. Or you can discuss and find experts. Okay. So the 2 that are the best is doing projects is primary value. Having mentors is secondary. Okay, and that's how I would look at it. Reading is great. It gives you theory, but getting your hand, it's like building a barn, right? You read about hammers and you read about saws, but until you get around the sawdust, the nails, and the boards, you don't know what building the barn is all about. And that's why we want to do projects. Now, how do you go about doing projects when you don't understand them? First of all, find a simple way to approach. Just like building a barn, right? You'd want to build a small barn first, not a lot of detail to it, okay? So small projects. You want smaller projects. And you want to do them pretty simple, that we call informal, right? You don't need formal documentation for everything, but you need formal documentation for some pieces. Now, what if you don't have the opportunity to work projects? Well, this is the funny thing. On the application for the PMP exam, it says you must have experience. Okay, what you don't read until you talk to an expert is you don't need the job title, project manager. You don't need to be the assigned PM. You merely need to have performed the work. So if you're on a project right now, talk to your project manager. If they're a PMP, great. This is something that you can actually use, okay? If your project manager is PMP, they have taken an oath to help you, okay? They must help you. I'm serious. It's one of those oaths of ethics and morals that says, nope, nope, you can't say no to me. You need to promote project management and good project management. So guess what? You have an automatic mentor there. Congratulations. Now, part of the work of projects is what? It's communication. It's doing emails. It's talking. It's talking in the hallways. It's talking in the elevators, and it's talking in the cafeteria. There are other pieces of project management, and if we were to continue this discussion, I can show you they're just as simple. A lot of these things don't need authority. What they need is the ability to understand that this work is project work, and I'm doing the leading and controlling by performing these tasks. Now, finally, what organizations may call projects may indeed be projects, and other work may be projects as well, all right? As long as it's unique, right? Requires its own plan, and it's bound by time, right? Specific start and end. You have a project. And even if you're the only person doing the project, and even if you're the person who's the entire team, you're doing project management activities. You're leading and directing, right? That's the key. That's where your experience comes from, okay? I would, if you're working in a work environment, take formal project management training so you can learn the terms and you can learn the general forms. It sounds like you have an understanding of the general framework, which is great, and that's a good start. In order to apply for the PMP, you need about 4,500 hours if you have a university degree. That's about 2.25 years if you're fully utilized on projects, 100%. But PMI, who owns the credential, prefers that you have this spread out across 3 to 8 years. But yeah, there's it, and we seem to think we need permission for all these things, right? Actually, if you can control your work, that means that you can ensure success and minimize failure. And if the tasks your director gives you are unique and time bound and you're making them more successful and you're removing failure, if I had somebody like that, I probably would be curious as to how they're doing this. And I would sit down and talk with you and find out, oh, you're putting some thought into this, right? As long as it doesn't get, as long as it ensures success and it minimizes failure, and the success of the project, like we said, generally as a director or project manager, it's reflected as success in the organization. So it works really well. Now, we can talk about mentorship too, and I'll talk about mentorship real quickly. A coach is somebody who gives you a skill, and that's great. You're going to have coaches along all the way, and there's a definite start and there's a definite end to coaching because once you're trained, you know the material, you can go on. Second of all, a mentor is a relationship. If you're curious about a relationship, I would look into Project Management Institute and look at 2 places. There's a website called projectmanagement.com, which is a community, much like LinkedIn, for people who are pursuing the PMP credential and other credentials. And there's also local chapters, and local chapters give you an opportunity to meet face-to-face with local project management experts. And you can build relationships with these people. And guess what? They get credit for having a relationship with people like you who are wanting to build skills. That is what I'd advise. It takes about 3 to 5 years to become an expert to where you can pass the PMP exam and you feel rather confident. And beyond that, you're just refining and refining and refining. Looks like we have a second question. Hi, Sana. Let's see what we have. I'm just going to copy this question real quickly. As an academic, teaching project management courses to engineering students without professional experience, can you apply for the PMP exam? Good. You know what? I'm going to be able to continue this discussion and give a little bit more advice I'm going to go back to the PMI website. There are specific requirements for taking the PMP exam. You have to be approved. And if you go over here, and I'll let's see, can I send this out? Maybe. If you go to the PMI website, www.pmi.org, click to certifications, and select the PMP, you can actually pull down the handbook and it'll tell you the requirements. And this is what I was just describing. There's two other components you need, and now there's details around those components, right? Let's see, let me get my highlighter out. And let me choose another color. You need 35 hours of formal education. Now, this could be university training, right? This could be inside of a company formal training. It's somewhere you can actually have documented evidence that you took project management related training. Now, that could be leadership training. That could be management training. It could be risk. It could be finance. It could be any aspect of project management. You also need experience. And as I described before, if you have a university degree, or what we call a bachelor's degree in the United States, you need 4,500 hours of experience leading and directing projects. Now let's actually bottom out of this, okay? There's a couple things we need to understand. First of all, you may already have experience leading and directing projects, okay? First of all, a project is a unique undertaking, right? Requires its own plan, never been performed in this manner, and is time bound, okay? Specific start and end. I was a marketing manager. I was a marketing engineer, right? Conferences, those are projects. Never the same and has a start and end. I did a lot of promotional activities, educational awareness, right? Unique and time bound. Product launches. All these things are projects, and we don't realize that we're doing projects all the time. So in a university environment, I'd look for the last 3 to 5 years and see how much of your work was repeated operations, just regular stuff that never changes, and then projects that apply change in a controlled manner. Next, there's a little document here called the exam content outline. You need to look right now at the current exam content outline, okay? This is the one that applies today. The new content outline doesn't come into effect until next June 2020, so you don't have to worry about it. It's interesting, but you don't have to worry about it for today. Now, this document here lists the tasks that a project manager does on the project. So if you do these things, you're already managing projects. Let me give you an example. There are initiating tasks, which are proposals, and they gain project approval, right? They're how you get a project together, and you have approval from people who have the funding and say, yes, I want you to do this. And then there's some planning. And then there's leading and directing project work. And then there's monitoring, controlling, and closing. Let's look at the individual tasks. PMI has all this stuff laid out, right? So it's very easy to find this detail. So if you're doing work that is unique and it's time bound, and these are the activities you're doing it, you can take credit for the hours that you do this within your projects. Perform stakeholder analysis, right? Who are the people impacted by my project? Who are the people that could impact my project, right? That counts. Identifying risk, participate in the development of the charter. And if you take the classes, you learn that the charter is nothing more than an approval. It's a document, certainly, but it is actually what breathes life into the project. It says, once you have approved charter, you have a project. Now, obtaining approval, conducting benefit analysis. Have you ever done a business case? That's part of it. Informing stakeholders of the approved project charter. And I tell my students this all the time. Even if you have no authority, you can't make any decisions. A lot of times your organizational manager puts you in a position where you're overseeing work and you're communicating. That's leading and directing a project. We can actually see this even more when we go into planning. We don't just make a plan. We plan for cost. We plan for scope. We start capturing requirements. We develop our resource plan. We develop our communication plan. How are we going to communicate, right? How am I going to talk to my stakeholders? How often do I send my emails out? Are we going to have formal meetings? We're going to have conference calls over the phone. That counts as hours towards that. And those are the hours you can use to gain approval. Plan for risk, plan for change, plan for quality. All of these things talk about it. Present the plan to the relevant stakeholders in order to obtain approval. Conduct kickoff meeting. Develop stakeholder plan. There's a lot of little tiny steps that you don't have to have any authority for, and you can actually claim it as leading and directing work. Let's continue this just a little bit more. In executing, maintain stakeholder relationships, right? The CEO and you are in the elevator and you're talking about the project. That counts. You're sitting down with the team member, seeing how they're doing, over a free cup of coffee in the cafeteria, and just ensuring that they're comfortable and they're moving forward and they have what they need. That counts as leading and directing the project. Managing the flow of information, right? Make sure the documents are going where they're going and the people are talking. All that I'm talking about are included in those 4,500 hours across 3 to 8 years. We do this naturally in our work. And what we learn as we prepare for the PMP exam, same thing you do in projects, except you get credit for it. That's all. There's a lot more to it. There's monitoring, controlling, which has to do with inspection and variance analysis and trend analysis, as well as forecasting and ensuring the proper changes are approved. This goes into it too, right? Contracting. Contracting is all about projects, right? You want a contract to be open, and as soon as possible, you want to close it. Guess what you have? Sounds like we have a project on our hands. And the same thing with closing. Obtaining feedback. That sounds like surveys. Do you ever do surveys within that unique work that's time-bound? Do you archive documents and information? The only reason I went through this exam content outline is to demonstrate two things. Number one, you're doing this work all the time. And number two, you're probably doing this work inside projects, even though you don't call them projects. So you may have the ability to actually be able to claim this and prepare for the exam. Now, getting accepted for the exam and preparing for the exam are two different topics. and preparing for the exam takes a little more effort. Let's see here. I have a bunch of questions now. Just a second.
Well, Tim, in that case, I can go ahead and unmute the participants so as to ask the questions.
And by the way, a thesis is a wonderful project. It's a wonderful project. Yeah, it's unique and it's time bound. Now, in order for it to qualify, you're going to have to consider having a reference. So if you have your thesis mentor be able to be a reference, you're fine with that. Let's see here.
Tim, do you want me to unmute the participants so that they can ask the questions directly
Oh,
to you?
please do. Please do.
Hi Tim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I have a question. You said something early on in in this lecture where you said if you can teach your team why we do what we do as project managers, you can lead them through more effectively. So my question really is, which is the more important in this? Is it domain knowledge of the specific industry and the tasks that you're working with, or PMP framework knowledge, or is it actually a combination of both?
It's a combination of both and more. The framework we aspire for is a framework that says that the team is the expert in the technology. The framework is where the project manager has their expertise, and combining the two is what makes the magic occur. The team does the work and the project manager ensures the control. Now, neither one is more important. However, we look at leadership, and if you just take leadership in general, this question gets even more interesting because it starts looking at something called motivation. People are much more motivated if they know why this is needed, why it's necessary. So you have leaders talk about why. When I was in marketing, my marketing manager said, Tim, within 5 seconds, if the people talking with you don't know why they should be talking with you, they're going to move on. And it's the same thing with your team. And you have to be the master of why. A lot of times with the team, your team's going to come to you and says, why we have to do this? Well, here's the executive and here's the strategy. You're not just putting a box together. This box is going to change the direction of the corporation, and it's going to generate this much revenue, and it's going to change our course. Okay, all of a sudden they're contributing something of great value, not just making a box. And then you're turning around and talking to the executives. And the executives are saying, why do we have to wait for 3 weeks? Because you have this majestic corporate why, and the team is a small part, but their part has technical steps. And if you really want it the way you do, we have to do this. So in a way, the project manager is the intercession. They're just like any other leader. They sit in the back and they're the traffic cop. You know, they're presenting the executive why to the team so the team's motivated, and they're providing the executing why back to the execution, back to the executives. So the executives can understand and they can accept and they can be more satisfied. And if you do that enough, that's where the trust is ensured. People like to be a part of something bigger than who they are. It's all about Maslow, right? And so when I talk about this big why, yes, it's about the technical aspects of project management, and You should be ready to explain why you're doing things the way you're doing. The VP here wants to know how big a piece this is of their strategy so they can figure out how much the budget we get next 6 months. That's sort of important, isn't it, team? And also, it's the technology part too. And if the team doesn't understand their work, we learn in our training that the leader is responsible for failure where the team makes success. And that's the beautiful thing. It's the soldiers who win the war and the generals who lose it. It's the sad part of leadership. We have to take accountability and we have to be able to move in. And that's where I come back to making sure everybody understands why. I may not understand their work, but I understand the reason the work is valuable. And if I can actually translate the value back to them, it gives them motivation. Yeah, at one level, it's a very specific why, but at a higher and much more influential level, it's much more general. It's human behavior. It's all about motivation. Thanks for that question, Paul.
Just following up on that, do you think somebody who has had a long history in, on the project team side, in various projects with domain knowledge, has an advantage to get the point across about why we're doing what we're doing, or is a talented, articulate project manager who has no knowledge just as easily? Can they do that just as easily?
That's tough. That's tough. I think it's very situational and it's very individual.
Right.
Once upon a time, I was masterful in IT projects. And then all of a sudden it was ordained that I should not be just for IT because I had a wealth of knowledge in finance and in business. And why don't I consider managing these type of projects and also contributing my expertise to that? And so I had to make a big decision. And I realized that it gave me an opportunity to actually step away from the team. It's a very personal decision. I think there is value in being a team member who understands the various aspects of project management. It makes it very easy for the project manager to delegate and to integrate and have them participate in things like managing conflict and managing issues. And you don't have to teach them about the role of communication and risk and quality per se anymore. But at the same time, having a project manager who's a generalist has incredible value. Without that general knowledge, I wouldn't have been able to work in fuel and oil and healthcare and federal and civic government projects and work in finance and once you start doing that and you're a generalist, whether you're an expert in databases, whether you're an expert in management and leadership, once you get exposure across industry and sector, all of a sudden it's like traveling the world. You find out that people are people the world over. And the interesting things are the cultural differences and the political differences and the perception differences, and the same thing with project management. It doesn't answer your question per se, but yes, it's valuable to a point, but there's a point where you need to grow beyond. And all of a sudden you realize databases are behind the Chicago Board of Exchange, and they also are helping us drive pharmacy, and it's also helping us work in healthcare. I hope that perspective gave you a little bit of insight.
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Welcome. And I see another question here. What's the difference between a PMP and a CAPM? Let me share this on the screen. This is a very quick answer. I could say 70 questions in an hour. I'm serious. The exam for the PMP is 4 hours and 200 questions, and the exam for CAPM is 3 hours and 130 questions, and they're the same questions. The PMP demonstrates you're an expert in managing and leading projects. The CAPM credential shows that you're an expert in participating and contributing. Now, those of you who know Prince 2, Prince 2 came out of England and the United Kingdom, let me correct myself. And it actually is not a competing credential. It's fascinating. They both align with ISO 21500, which is the International Standard Organization standard for project management. But Prince 2 has levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And level 1 aligns with CAPM, which says I'm an expert in participating in projects. I can contribute as a team member, and I know how projects work. And this actually says I'm good, right? I can work within this environment effectively. You can actually apply these things, not necessarily to leading and directing to project success, but participating and contributing to project success. So that's level 1, Prince 2. And then the PMP is level 2. The question whenever this comes up in the PMP class is, should I wait and get my PMP, or should I just get my CAPM and build towards my PMP? Well, it depends. There's two things: market demand, economics, right? Are you in a large corporate environment? Are you in a large city that has a lot of publicly traded, major revenue corporations, because they recognize the CAPM and they recognize Prince 2 level 1. If not, I would look at my experience and see if I can qualify right now for my PMP. CAPM is a great stepping stone, but again, you're going to be taking the 3-hour, 130 question quiz here, and in 3 years, you're going to take the quiz. Now, the quizzes are different, right? The exams are different. You can actually take the CAPM exam, I think, from your home. You'll need to look at the exam at the material. Yeah, there's an online proctored exam that this just came up 2 years ago. But all the information you need is over here on pmi.org. Look at the two, ask questions, and then make the decision that's valuable for you. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And by the way, everyone, we're going to be starting a PMP prep class here on the 9th of November. You can get all the material and the information out, and you can stay in touch with us over here at Ijona Academy, okay? And you can go in here, take a look at our webinars and what's coming up. You can continue to talk about us, talk with us, and we also have the training here too. So yeah, please stay in touch, everyone. This is a unique opportunity. I have taken the oath as well, which means I'm committed and obligated to help you through this process. That's what we do here. We are all mentors. You guys are just as expert as we are. An effective leader knows that they go in a room and half the people in that room are smarter than them in something. And if a leader is smart, they'll listen as much as they talk. Any other questions or any more questions? Well, we have some upcoming webinars. Find us out on LinkedIn too. You can look up Ijona Academy and we do promote through there as well. But you can just come to the webinars link off of Ijona Academy. You can see what we're going to be talking about. The next topic, again, is very interesting, and you should see more material on this coming out in the next few days. I want to thank you again, everyone. I will remain here for a minute or two. Back over to you, Muli.
Hey, thank you so much, Tim. Right, exactly. Like Tim said, we are starting our batch exactly on the 9th of November. If anybody is interested in the batch, please do let us know. Please share your feedback after the session. And if you have any further questions, please raise your hand and I'm going to unmute you. Thank you. I
Okay.
did unmute you, Stefano. Please go ahead. Or if you're not able to connect with the audio, what you can do is you can share the question with me and I can ask Tim.
We still have a question. Good.
I still do see your hand raised, so I am waiting for the question. I have unmute you, so you can go ahead and talk, Mr. Orfeo. Okay, Tim, I think that's more or less about it. And thank you so much for joining with us today and helping us out to answer a lot of questions that we had today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, all the participants. You have a wonderful day ahead.